Hi, welcome back to The Creator's Soul, a podcast miniseries about the creative process and its application in every area of your life. I'm your co-host, Elizabeth, a creative producer and director based in New York City.
And I'm HeyJune, an energy and leadership coach with a background in Wall Street and New York City tech startup. In today's episode, we're going to talk about potential, seeing it in yourself, and how this is a creative starting point in your career, relationships, and all other things that you create. So, Elizabeth, I'm curious, what does success mean to you?
It's a good question. It's a question that almost feels like, what is the meaning of life? Each year, I take some time to evaluate, where am I going? What is the direction? And what is the success that I'm seeking this year? And to be honest, I've realized a few things that I value. And I would say that to me feels like success. And those things that I have come to value are the types of people that I surround myself with. Are those people energizing? Are they skilled? Are they thoughtful, conscientious citizens of their community and the relationships that they're a part of? I also think about what am I producing, not just as being a producer, definitely as in a creative way, but what am I producing and is it necessary and timely in the world? Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a lot of things that we do out of compulsion, like, oh, I think I should do this, or I need to do this because somebody else expects this from me. But I think there's a lot of value, and for me, a lot of success in connecting with the outcomes and knowing that what I'm producing and what I'm putting out into the world is very thoughtful and there's a reasoning behind it. I'll just talk about in professional sense. Being in a creative industry, I've found there to be a lot of pressure on credentials. In particular, if you're a producer, you usually get siloed into something like, are you an agency producer? Meaning you're working with big brands. What big agency are you a part of? You're usually working with big budgets and, putting out these crazy commercials or brand campaigns, which is great. But usually what I've seen is that comes with exploitation of workers, incredibly long hours, lots of stress. Not saying that every agency environment's like that, but certainly it is a agency culture and a badge of honor for a lot of producers that work in agency life. The other aspect of producing is a lot of film work. I was actually just talking to a colleague this past weekend about working in the film industry, and it is also expected to be very long days, a lot of personal boundary crossing because you need to get it done. You're going to have to be willing to sacrifice either your time. There's usually not great communication patterns in leadership in the film industry where it's really based around money or time or deadlines. Not to say that's every film set, but it is part of the culture. So I think you have to be super conscious of how you are operating, what are you producing in those environments, if you would choose to pursue that path. And I think that can be said of any person who's working in any creative industry. What is that top tier credential that everyone talks about? Is it to be published? Is it to talk at a certain event? Is it to have a certain title? Is it to have a certain salary? That's all. Those all could be things that are markers of success for you. But for me, what I've realized to be very valuable is this conscientious evaluation of, what am I creating? Is it necessary? What good is it doing in the world? And what cost is that going to be accomplished? And then also thinking about the people that I'm with. What are those relationships that I'm building along the way?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can certainly build or burn bridges and build bridges while you're pursuing success.
So I want to take it a step further and ask you, because every industry has their own version of success, right? To your point, like I can't think of someone that I work with that didn't care about credentials to a certain degree, whether it's like tech or Wall Street. It's all about like, who you know, where'd you go to school, where'd you work before. And but the reason why I ask you is because what initially even like attracted you to that vision, whether it's like a producer selling you on a vision or a brand selling you on a vision, there must have been something that they did to kind of like tug at your heartstrings, right? And right, I just feel like that's why we all sign up for something. Yeah, like money's a big component, but I would imagine for a creative person like yourself, there's
Mm,
something deeper than that. So I'm sure there's like a stark contrast between like what they sold you on versus like the harsh reality.
yes.
So could you speak a little
Yeah.
bit about that? Like how like what you were first sold on and the realities that came up?
Yes. I think this is so interesting, and it's a very clear choice in my life to put value over credentials or achievement. I was very academic throughout my life. Had a lot of options for excellent schools coming out of high school, and I remember having to choose like my course of study in college. Not everybody goes to college, but I was like, hey, like I want to go away. I want to have space to grow and study something that I care about, and then turn that into my life work. And I remember the moment when I was like, oh, I'm going to go for something creative.
Mhm.
I initially went for theater management and writing. And I really connected with that because I was like, I want to be able to communicate really well, and I want to be able to understand the business operations of a creative medium like theater. And I found this spark of creativity within me through theater. I was really involved in theater in high school. So that was the starting point. And I think throughout my exposure to corporate structures, nonprofit organizations, um, and really getting to test that out in different geographical locations, different types of communities and ways of working, I found that being able being able to create and being able to um, hold space from like a business perspective for really great content and stories was super important to me.
Mhm.
So when I was first kind of like trying everything, I basically spent 10 years just like doing everything possible. Um,
Mhm.
Even like from like a non-creative perspective, I worked in retail, the food industry, hospitality.
Yeah.
Um, I've done landscaping, house cleaning. I've done all of these different jobs, plus worked in a variety of creative aspects, production coordinator, PA. I've worked in company management in a theater company. Like, there's so much that I tried. And I think from all of that, I realized how important it was to, to me, to tell stories and how
Yeah.
powerful they were. So that's really why I chose to dig into producing. And now I'm also incorporating more of my directing skills because I feel like the power of story is essential, and being able to communicate through story is really one of the earliest ways that we started creating meaning together and as humans. So that's why I got into producing and really wanted to hold space for other creatives to collaborate and do that in a space that was um, welcoming, thoughtful, and producing really great work.
So after college, when did you jump into the creative industry? Was it like immediately or after several years of doing different things?
I always stayed in the creative industry somehow. Um,
Okay.
I was like immediate, like as I was graduating, I actually was working at a dance studio teaching 3 to 5 year olds gymnastics and ballet,
Nice.
which was so much fun. Um, but I would say like even in like when I was working these jobs that might not feel related to the creative industry, like food service or retail, I was reading plays, I was reading books, I was reading books about business and how to run a creative business and how corporations were run. So I was always learning, and I think that that was always being driven by this desire to tell stories and to connect with people through stories. The more experiences you have in life, the more uh, stories that you find. Like the things that I've heard people say in a restaurant or in the back of the kitchen, for instance, those are things that I have written down and I have in my
Yeah.
dialogue book.
Yeah.
Because I was very conscious that I wanted to be telling stories. I just didn't know exactly what that meant yet or like how it was supposed to manifest.
What
So
what
it,
I'm
yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, I didn't mean to interrupt. But what I'm hearing from you is that your definition of success, and maybe you couldn't articulate it back then, but it seems to me like from an early age, you saw like experiences as success
Mm,
and learning about different lifestyles and really hearing about people all around the world, hearing about different cultures and um, maybe like absorbing the different kinds of like human experiences.
mm.
Right? It seems like that was like it's kinda weird to put it this way, but maybe, like, that's how you saw what success is back then. I don't know, like, what your, like how your childhood was and, like, what it was like growing up, but it seems to me like you just kinda want to, like, leave your comfort zone, experience the world. That's sort of like my takeaway, and then you enter the creative world, and, unfortunately, when we embark on a journey pursuing our highest potential or our version of success, there's going to be people along the way that take advantage of that. Like they kind of like prey upon our dreams, they prey upon our skills, and they prey upon our ambition. And your curiosity and your enthusiasm for other people's stories, it seems, was more like hijacked by those. I mean, that was probably unintentional, but that's just how jobs and employers work. It seems like they hijacked your curiosity and your vision to be deployed into their projects. Um, and I'm sure you signed up for it to a certain degree because you like the project, but the reality is, I think when I think anytime you try to execute something into reality, it starts to get a little bit messy, especially the more people are involved. So I think kind of comes back full circle, like today, where you're realizing, like, yeah, I'm embarking this journey because I want to tell stories. I just didn't realize like how many people be like roped in and like pull my energy so that I can help like tell their story or whatever.
That is, yes. And I think that is something that I've realized over these last, I would say, in particular, 10 years of really trying everything and being open to so many types of people and cultures and all of that. I think it's so beautiful how nuanced our human experience can be. There's a lot of things that we share, but there's a lot of ways that we shape meaning that we take for granted. We've been hearing a lot about unconscious bias, but that's a real thing, and it's
Yeah.
because we don't really maybe place ourselves in situations where we're really organically understanding people who don't have customs like us or look like us or go about their day to day like us. Um, I really feel passionate about connecting and building a bridge between those understandings, between uh, personal experiences. But that does come with the danger of uh, investing too much energy into somebody else's vision or story. or project rather, um, because it is something where when you are someone who's very empathetic and gracious and like want to, see the best in people, that is not cared for in the ways to help it prosper or
Yeah.
to for you to be bettered through the process. Often, when somebody sees that kind of willingness, there's a lack of care and a lot of um, exploitation, I guess. Is a,
Yeah.
maybe it's a little extreme, but it's like you. A lot of times, it's exploited, and I
Even
think
if
part
it's
of
even if
yeah,
it's unintentional, it's still
yeah,
exploitive, right?
yes. Yes, and one of the things that I really try to do as a leader is to pay attention on to where people are being exploited
Mhm.
and how people are being interacted with, and how their energy is feeding into the larger project, but also ensuring that they are not making that project their entire self.
Yeah.
Because I've done that. I've said, "Oh, this project it's going to be like the next thing in my career or this job it's going to be the next thing in my career."
Mhm.
But was it really the only thing that was going to define me? No.
Right.
And I have seen a lot in the creative industry where people like make the work that they do their identity.
Yeah.
Or they make that title their identity. Even outside of the creative industry, I think I'm sure you've seen that too. And you mentioned it earlier where credentials, who you know, your network, it matters.
Yeah.
But to what extent are you making that who you are?
Yeah. See, so as you know, I've like been in multiple different industries. I've industry hopped. I'm notorious for that. Like 3 to 4 different industries the past like 10 years. So the way I see success is identity shifting
Mm,
precisely because of what you just said,
yep.
which is this like need to how should I put this? I don't know. I feel like people kind of get trapped into one identity, right?
Hmm.
And they get enslaved to it.
Mm,
And I don't see that as success at all. Kind of like you, like I see success as like experiencing different things, like being exposed to different perspectives, like, putting myself in different people's shoes and just like really like absorbing the fullness of life because I know that there's more to earth and this earthly experience than just me and my perspective, right? But yeah, like I've gotten a lot of backlash throughout my life, like from parents, friends, family that are very much like, oh, if you just like stuck it out for a few more years, like you would have made it to MD. Or like if you could just like commit for a few more years and you would have like gotten this like crown jewel of this industry. It's like you can't seem to, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like I've seen through the whole thing. I've cycled through it. Like even if I wasn't in that MD spot, I worked for an MD.
yep.
I saw what they were like. I didn't want it. I didn't like it. But I think that unfortunately too many people see success as like achieving that exact title,
Hmm.
right? Which is I think what you're alluding to, like achieving that exact credential. Like you gotta like stick it out and you gotta like bear it. You gotta like pour in blood, sweat, and tears until you get that comp or that position or that award or whatever, even if it like crushes your soul. And if and even if when you do get there, you realize you've strayed so far from like your original intention of like why you set out in the first place.
Yes. I think there's an aspect of selling out when you aren't willing to evolve as you make discoveries and realizations. I'm going to be an actor. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm my degrees in theater, performance, and dance. I have all of this training in acting and various aspects of that. But along the way, I realized, you know what? I really love bringing people together around a story. And I
Yeah.
really like being able to help with the writing process. And I really like being able to put a budget together. And you know
Yeah.
what? I think I like that more than just being in front of the camera or on stage.
Right.
And not to
Right.
say that that isn't like just doing that is not enough. But for me,
Right.
there was this point where I was like, I was feeling shame over that transition because I was like, well, I failed. I wasn't an actor. But I was like, no, you were. You just discovered something else.
Right.
You want to do more.
Right. Because it goes back to like this idea of like infinite potential, right? Like, is being an actor really the top of that infinite potential?
Right.
Like,
Yes. Is
like
it?
that, right? That's the ultimate question that I think that's like the essence that we all lose like touch with because of what society says. Like, oh, you have to be an actor so that you can like be on the red carpet and like win this award. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of pressure like that, right?
Yep.
And that creates all sorts of like it just brings up so many like insecurities and like limiting beliefs and like self-sacrifice and ignoring of like the reality of like your skill sets almost because I don't know if you've seen this but I've seen this a lot where people like sign up to do things that they really should not be doing like their skills and strengths are somewhere else
Yeah.
but because they feel like tremendous societal pressure to like achieve that one credential which again has nothing to do with like their ultimate potential they just like go through years of like abuse and like trying to figure out like why can't I do this thing like well maybe it's just not meant for you like I went through that too where I really thought that like I could be this like trader which is crazy because I'm like not like you'll 100% lose your money if you trade with me I'm just saying but I did that because I went to business school and like everybody in my business school said that was success right so and then like I've stumbled across like other paths that were like much more suitable for me and like now I feel more fulfilled and like I don't feel so ashamed of myself anymore but I can only imagine so many people are still stuck in being in that actor role or being in that trader role and putting in the work year after year and like working for assholes and not wondering why like things are not working well it's because it wasn't to the top of your potential.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's something that we are not told to pay attention to. Um, and what that is, what I'm referring to is that feeling of desperateness, dissatisfaction, kind of always having to like look over your shoulder, like, am I doing enough? Am I getting to where I need to go?
Yeah.
I I'm not saying that like when you're on the right trajectory that it's going to not be there's not going to be anxiety filled moments or moments when you're doubting yourself, but if every day is filled with dread and you don't
Yeah.
see the good that you're doing, I think hard stop, take a look.
Yeah.
Because I'm speaking from experience. I
Yeah.
had somebody tell me, you know what, why are you so anxious? Why are you so like scared to go to work? Not scared, but just like dreading it.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Whether your work week starts on a Monday or like whenever your work starts, if you're dreading it, if you're feeling dissatisfaction, take a look and uncover like where is that coming from?
Yeah. That's a really good point. Instead of like telling yourself, I gotta stick this out, like actually pause and be like, okay, but why does this feel so scary to your point?
Hmm.
So wait, I'm curious though, because now you're kind of like, now I feel like you're doing something that is more aligned with like what you've always wanted to do, right? Which is like tell stories and manage people and help creative people kind of like execute on their vision. Like you're doing all these things. So based on your experience, um, how do you approach conveying your vision, your creative vision to your team now? And how do you manage like independent skill sets? Like, because there's two things, right? Like number one, like you still want to tell a good story and you don't want to compromise on the quality of that, obviously. So how do you kind of wrangle the team together, but also like conveying your excitement energy around it? And the second component is like, yeah, like how do you give feedback to someone who could be sensitive or who is feeling the fear that you have felt before? Like, what are some things that you do to manage all this?
Yes. Well, one of the most important things is to remain human. And what I mean by that is to remain aware and sensitive to people's emotions and pay attention to where your team is getting the most excited and
Mhm.
most joy.
Yeah.
Because for me, those are the biggest indicators of a well functioning team is if they are feeling excited and happy to get into the work, even if you're problem solving, because
Mhm.
half of the teams that I work with, there's always something that happens where it's like, well, that was unexpected, or now we have to change the plan.
Mhm.
But if people are happy to help each other and happy to work together to come up with a solution, to me, that is a sign of a well functioning team and
Mhm.
individuals within that team that are well and healthy and thriving. So when I'm putting those teams together, I really try to start with that kind of assessment of how is everybody? How is
Mhm.
everybody today?
Mhm. But going back to like conveying your original vision though, what if let's just say where the team feels excited about
Mm.
doesn't really add to your vision as a leader? Then how do you handle that?
When I'm conveying an original vision or a vision to a team, I try to refine down, what is that vision exactly, and
Mhm.
identify a few actionable steps to realizing that.
Mhm.
Um, however, if I have the opportunity, I will build the team around the vision. That's the ideal scenario.
I see. Okay.
So I will find the people who are best fit for the different aspects of the project
Got it.
and do that with that same awareness that I was talking about with team dynamics, where I'm paying attention to like how does this personality and skill set fit with this personality and skill set, and how do they function together in this particular aspect of the project.
Right. Right. Um,
Yeah.
I would imagine in that vetting process, I would imagine that you take extra steps to be realistic as possible, right? Because going back to like people that you've worked with and for before,
Mm-hmm.
because let's be honest, like there are people out there who like oversell on a vision, and turns out it's so different, right? And like you went through the horrors of that, so I would imagine like you're trying to avoid that now. So are you like extra real with people when you're trying to assemble a team? Like, do you tell them like, listen, like there's gonna be times when like this sucks, but it's gonna be great if we pull this together. Like, do you do you go to that place, or like how do you really convey? I guess I'm curious about like because it's a little bit like dating, right? Like how transparent are you up front? It's kind of like that.
Well, in dating, I also am pretty, like, very much the same as I am as a leader, I think.
That's great.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought in that correlation because I think I feel like for me, another aspect of success is that continuity of person, that you
Hmm.
never have to pretend or like put on a persona in order to be, with this particular group or this particular group.
I think that's a really underrated metric of success.
Hmm.
Like how much can you just be you without giving a shit on all levels?
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like, so to answer your question about um, how honest am I about the whole what's behind the curtain with the team? I'm pretty honest. I say pretty because there are times where it's actually not beneficial to the work process to share
Mm,
all of the information.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's like teaching. If you basically like gave your students the whole textbook and like dumped all that information on them versus taking it chapter by chapter, working through it, maybe prefacing what's coming next, answering
Yeah.
questions, folding in the information. Part of being a leader is taking the time to recognize what information is going to be the most beneficial to your team. How do you shape the conversation with people when you're talking about their potential and where they're headed?
Yeah, so it's very similar to how you described managing your teams or like assembling a crew. you want to sell them on a vision, but you also want to be realistic, right? And that's kind of like what I do with the clients that I coach. So, for example, they come to me with their vision. They come to me with, hey, I want to get into this relationship, or I want to get this job, or I want to get this promotion, or I want to divorce. Like their life goals vary. Usually it's usually people come to me because they feel like they're pretty capped and they want to break through that glass ceiling. Like they know there's something more for them, but they don't know how to get there. Now, with me, where I gotta be careful is not hurting their feelings when I feel like they're being unrealistic with A, their potential or their goal, and or maybe their potential or their goals is fine. It's they can get there, but B, they're not willing to put in the work or willing to change or acquire certain skills to get there. So it's always the potential that I have to tweak or the current behaviors and attitudes and choices that needs to be tweaked. It's either or. Very rarely it's both at the same time. At least I've had the pleasure of not having to deal with that. But I have to constantly remind people, I have to ask people the why. I think a lot of folks, I think Simon Sinek did a really great job explaining this. People know what they do and people know how they do what they do. Very rarely do people answer why they do what they do. So I usually put the question back on the client and say, okay, you're telling me you want these things. Let's start with why. And it's gonna open up a whole can of worms, and usually it boils down to, like, some kind of, like, belief they have or some childhood dream they had or something the mom said to them when they were, like, 5 and it stuck in their, like, mind, whatever, right?
Yep.
Um, there's a lot of unearthing that happens. I get pretty transparent about, like, "Okay, here are your 3 options to getting to this point." So I'll kinda, like, lace in, like I'll tell them, like, you can do A or B or C, and usually the C is like a revealer of their own limitation.
Mm.
So if you're option C, I go, "Oh, I don't wanna do that," and I'm like, "Okay, but you just said to me this goal is important to you, so why aren't you willing to do option C?" Like, I won't come out, like, straight away and say, like, I don't know if you can do that," but I will tell them, like, "Here is a path you can take," because that is true, you can take that. So, for example, like, if I, spoke, like, tactically here, if I'm working with someone who is in not a very happy marriage, and she's very young, um, and she's also having an affair. So she she wants to be in a happy relationship, but this person that she's having an affair with cannot commit, and the person that she's married to isn't going to change.
Mm.
So we went in circles for weeks where we got to the root of, okay, you're saying you want to be in a happy relationship. Neither of those options are feasible. So why not leave? It sounds so simplistic when you spell it out like that, but
Yeah.
humans are complicated. We have all these like layers and layers that it takes us a long time to get to certain conclusions sometimes or like see things clearly. So in her case, she was in a lose-lose situation. Okay, so her truth isn't so much that she wants to be in a happy relationship. Her truth is that she doesn't want to be lonely. That's like even an even deeper truth. That's why she couldn't like get out of either situation, even though they were less than ideal. So in
Mm.
that case, I had to work with her and say, your highest potential isn't to just avoid loneliness. That's like the bottom. The top of the potential is to truly first and foremost be happy in yourself and believe that there is genuinely someone better for you out there so that you don't have to like negotiate with these like two lesser options. And again, like these are not easy situations. Like it's, there's a lot of like nuances, there's history, there's family stuff. Like I get it. But it took her like a solid 3 weeks to finally realize, like, okay, I guess loneliness is my true fear, not so much like anything else that like I've been thinking about. Which at that point, she has to come to terms with the fact that maybe she's not as brave as she thought.
I really feel that this connects back to success because that is getting to the root of why really defines where you are as a person. Like
Yeah,
the fear of loneliness, that is so, oh my gosh, I feel for me, and I'm sure for other people, like that is a legitimate fear
absolutely.
that you
Absolutely.
have to decide what what is worth the potential of that happening,
Right.
right?
Right.
is it worth it to me to stay in a relationship, whether that's romantic or a work relationship or a friend relationship, and deal
Yeah.
with the outcomes and how I'm like the negative feelings that I'm having, or like the stress and the strain and the roles that I'm enacting? Is it worth me doing that, or is it more worth me being lonely maybe for a little while and then finding those people
Right.
who are really going to energize me and love
Right.
me and give me life?
Right. Right. I completely agree. So you're right. It does come back to the idea of success. And if we unpack that further, what's your vision for a healthy relationship?
Hmm.
So that's something that I like to throw at people. Like let's start from the beginning. What was your intention to start with to even get married in the first place? What did you want? Like, what did you want your morning to look like when you wake up next to this person? What did you want your first hour to look like? What did you want the end of the day to look like? How did you envision spending the weekend with this person, with the kids? If you get to that level of granularity, people like start to see more and more and more like, holy shit, yeah, this was not my initial vision of success at all. And I'm sure that happens in the workplace too. It's like you didn't envision to like, come like Sunday evening, get anxious, don't want to go to work the next day. Like, no, like when you first got the job, you probably was hoping that you'd be excited to wake up on a Monday morning.
Yeah, that's well, and I feel like when there is the recognition of a potential path and it looks like it's going to be the best possible thing for you,
Yeah.
it's so exciting usually. It's like
Yeah.
you mentioned dating earlier. It's like that
Yeah.
feeling of a first date that goes really well. And, you might have spent a couple hours together, but it's really this feeling of just, oh my gosh, like there's so much here and I like see the future. I see it.
Yep.
But then to your point about backing up a little and saying, okay, why? Why does this feel so good? Why do I like spending time with this person? Why am I choosing to put my energy here?
Right.
And and those answers reveal a lot about where you are in your journey and can also define a lot about what success means to you.
And I think, unfortunately, this is something that comes with age and time and maturity and experience.
Mhm.
But using that same dating example and putting it next to that leadership example you're talking about earlier around like transparency and assembling a team, um, there's a lot of situations and people that make you feel good at first, but then you realize your visions are not aligned. And this is the other advice that I give women all the time in dating. It's like, go back to the why. Why are you trying to date? Is it to have children? No. Is it just for a partnership? No. What is it? There's no judgment. This is your life. You do whatever you want, but this is your vision and you got to assemble the right team.
Mm.
So yes, like the flutter of the heart, that's very important. And hopefully you end up with someone who gives you that feeling, but at the same time, like, or your visions are aligned, kind of like recruiting someone or hiring someone, being realistic and being like, hey, like I think you're the right candidate for this job, but there's gonna be some hard times. Are you willing to stick it out for this vision?
Mm.
So I think the big caveat with pursuing our highest potential is that the right person can drag you down, or the wrong person can drag you down, or the right person can really amplify you. And the onus is on you to do what you're doing, which is to articulate your vision to your highest abilities up front.
Yes. And I think there's an aspect of asking for what you need and what you want, and also allowing for feedback from those people that you're assembling. Because sometimes there's going to be disagreement with what your approach to it or the things that you want to achieve, and there's times for compromise. So being able to talk about what you need, what you want, and also disagreements or other ways of acting out those tasks to get the job done, I feel like that can be really valuable to your journey too, where you're able to involve the people on your team in actively helping you as a leader or as a partner or whatever it might be to um, keep going and keep growing. And then
Yeah.
hopefully, I will reciprocate that for you in our team dynamic, our relationship dynamic.
The growing together and being transparent and evolving together. And you're right, like there's compromise involved. But I think that whole process is important because, like I said earlier, like we live in, or like you said earlier, the world is so full of options. It's so noisy. There's too many jobs, there's too many projects, there's too many people you can date. Um, but the reality is you can't manifest alone, right? You can't build something alone. You can't give birth to something alone. You need people. So finding someone who's excited about the vision, but also willing to stick it out through the ugliness and still stay excited about the end result, whatever that might be. I think that's key. And that, I mean, that whole process messy, but that's the biggest irony, right? Like we all want this big thing based on the potential, but you just can't do it alone.
You're going to have some sort of relationship at some point to keep functioning in the world and to keep making progress. And I think the sooner that we can, first of all, value our process and learn to ask for what we need and what we want, that is the first step. And then the second step is involving other people in that chaos that we're
Yeah.
experiencing,
Yeah.
but doing that in a way that is, full of empathy for their own process too.
Right.
Because hopefully those people that you're finding are also going to have journeys that they're on, and an awareness of where they're at, and I think you together can help shed light on the why, and help each other succeed.
I'm similar. Like I'm at a point where I'm like, you know what? I'm willing to put in extra work. I'm willing to do the difficult things if I really like the people that I'm with, truly.
Yeah.
And usually there's a shorthand for the vision. We might have different skill sets, different strengths and weaknesses, but there's a shorthand for being in alignment as far as like where we want to be. And
Yeah.
let's just say like we changed our vision or ideas, like somehow we still end up being in lockstep too, because there was like similar growth happening.
Yeah, that's interesting because I agree, and I've actually seen this um, in collaborations and in relationships before, where especially relationships, friendships in particular, where we share a similar vision for growth and a radical honesty as people.
Yeah.
And although we've gone on different paths, we've always come back based on those truths that we hold to, those guiding truths.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, and I've found that to be such an interesting correlation with what you just said, that you will have a lot of chaos as you go along, and a lot of changes to the plan, probably, or iterations on that. And that is not a sign of failure. Rather, I think that you have the opportunity to go back to what are those things that are really valuable to me.
I agree with 100%.
So, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we're going to dive into in the next episode is like, given all those things that could happen or that are exciting to you, how do you refine or like come to a next step? You gave the example of the person that you were working with, and I think that is something that's a really great example of like the time that it might take or the process of getting to that point.
Absolutely. And the skills needed to make the difficult decisions along the way,
Yeah.
which I definitely want to dive into next episode, because that is where like the real shit starts, when you have to be an active participant in your own reality.
Yeah, there's the dreaming stage, and that's where we've been today, is just going through all the possibility, the what ifs, and all of the reasons why we might go and pick a path. But I
Yeah.
agree. I think this next step of really connecting the skills and the values with concrete steps and next actions really is a challenging and nuanced part of living life.
Yep. we have some good stuff coming down the pipeline to be discussed.
Thanks for tuning in to Creator Soul, a podcast miniseries presented by Pheydrus and Potter Productions. We hope you join us for the rest of the series and discover something that will help you meet your fullest creative potential.